This is Mike Franklin, the property tax guy, and today I'm going to follow up on the hearing we had in the Jefferson County Courthouse, or I'm sorry, the Dulles State Office Building in Watertown, and we had a case with the town of Cape Vincent that I've done other videos on. But what I wanted to follow up on was that it occurred to me some interesting things transpired. You will have seen from these previous videos that the hearing took place in a courtroom. Now, I was a hearing officer myself for 4 years in 6 counties, and I participated in about 80 cases. And as a property tax advocate, as far as SCAR cases are concerned, I've participated more than I did as a hearing officer. Certainly at least 150 SCAR cases, but probably about 250 cases total. And in all the cases I had in, as far as small claims assessment review hearings, I never had any of those cases out of more than well over 150 cases. Never was a SCAR hearing held in a courtroom. They were always held in conference rooms. And for some reason, in this case, we had a courtroom that included three armed security personnel for a property tax assessment matter. So here we are tying up a courtroom, and we're tying up 3 security officers for a hearing that lasted about 45 minutes. And so, I started reflecting upon the ramifications of that. Out of all 150 plus cases, never having one in a courtroom, but in this case we did. And why would that be? And so I'm speculating, and I think it's a pretty good speculation, that my client told me I couldn't see the officers behind me in the hearing, and the one other officer, the sergeant, Hamburg, I believe is his name, he was at my left-hand side in my periphery. So I couldn't really see what he was doing either, but they tell me that he was sneaking around, looking over my shoulder at my computer. He was constantly getting closer and closer. He was essentially menacing me. So here I was, the hearing officer apparently has his own personal security detail at taxpayers' expense. And what occurred to me is, the reason they had it in a courtroom instead of in a conference room is that they felt that if they could catch me video recording in the courtroom, that they could arrest me. That's what they were looking to do, and so I find that rather disingenuous, but I find it consistent with the behaviors of William Ramseier, the hearing officer. We've had issues with him before. I'll give you an example, and you can determine for yourself whether or not you think it's accurate. But when he was I was a hearing officer when he was challenging his assessment, and I'd had a previous case with him, and he ruled in my favor in a previous case. I certainly didn't have anything against the guy, but what he did was, he gave testimony that indicated that the property that he bought had been on the market for 463 days, and then 17 days after the listing expired, went into contract with him. Also, the seller of the property didn't use an attorney, and there were no realtors involved. So he was trying to get his assessment reduced by a total of 3.25%, which is another precedent. I've never had anybody challenge their assessment over 3.25%. Had he won, he would have saved himself about $180 in that particular year. But what he did is he wasted the assessor's time, he wasted my time, the court administrative time. So, basically he feels entitled to abuse the process that he actually works for, and it provides his livelihood, and all for $180. And But anyways, his argument was that a recent sale, if at arm's length and not abnormal in any way, is the best indication of value. But what I found was that because the seller didn't use an attorney, obviously he trusted Mr. Ramseier, and the fact they didn't have a realtor, because it appears that he evaded the realtor's fee, about $7,500, which is the amount of his assessment reduction he was looking for, coincidentally. So, when I suggested to the administrative judge's office that Mr. Ramseier had moral fiber issues, the law clerk for the administrative judge, Ms. Seiter, Seiter, she immediately defended him, without having any knowledge of the situation. Just automatically defended him, which I find that odd. It's kind of like the Blue Line gang, where they defend each other no matter what kind of despicable things that they've done. And so that's what she did. She defended him without even knowing what was going on in the situation, and I find it despicable. And so, anyway, Mr. Ramseier did not allow the video recording. I asked him specifically for an explanation, and he refused to provide one. That is an appearance of impropriety. Court officers are supposed to avoid appearances of impropriety, and he didn't do that. So if he doesn't want me to record the hearing, I'm a member of the media. I have First Amendment rights. In order for him to do that, he would have to provide a logical, reasonable, articulable explanation as to why. It just can't be so because he said so. And that's just the kind of underhanded stuff that you can expect from William Ramseier. He's a law clerk for Judge McCluskey up in Watertown for the state court system, Jefferson County. And he's also the Justice of the Peace in Clayton. And he's a hearing officer. But the problem is that when he was going before me as a hearing officer, the assessor, the Clayton assessor, told me that she wanted to let the case go because she didn't want to have it impact her other cases. In other words, she was being intimidated by the hearing officer, and she's also the town justice, and so nobody wants to cross this guy, because for obvious reasons. He's got his hands in a lot of pies. Law clerk for a state Supreme Court judge, local justice of the peace. And then he's governing over people's assessment matters. This guy's got all the bases covered. But there's issues with William Ramseier for sure. And so as far as Miss Seiter is concerned, she says that she defends Mr. Ramseier's moral fiber, but she has no data to back that up. I'm going to also Miss Seiter suggests that I'm not a legitimate member of the press. So I'm going to read from the National Press Photography Organization's website. How do I obtain press credentials if I do not work for a newspaper or magazine, or if I am a freelancer? It is important to realize that you do not need a press credential to take pictures or cover events in public spaces, streets, parks, sidewalks that are not closed off to public access. You do not need government approval to work as a journalist, although it may be beneficial to obtain a press ID or an official government-issued press credential or other reasons. Press credentials related to news coverage are usually issued by law enforcement agencies. Requirements for the issuance of credentials are established by those agencies and vary by department. One agency may not recognize the privileges granted by the credentials from another department. Event-specific credentials are usually provided by the organizers of the event, i.e. major league sports, concerts, festivals, press conferences, etc. So anyway, there's, for example, with a football game. If you want to enter a football game, it's a private event. It's not a public matter. It's a private event, and and that can require press credentials, because if you go into Walmart, you can't just act as the press in Walmart, because it's a private matter. But in public, you don't need it. And but what I also want to get into is that Mr. Ramseier was quoting judicial policy, the judicial policy on audiovisual covers of judicial proceedings, and 131.1a indicates, in order to maintain the broadest scope of public access to the courts, to preserve public confidence in the judiciary, and to foster public understanding of the role of the judicial branch in civil society, it is the policy of the unified court system to facilitate the audiovisual coverage of court proceedings to the fullest extent permitted by New York civil rights law and other statutes, as interpreted by New York courts, pursuant to the rules set forth below. And also, 131.1d says nothing in these rules is intended to restrict any pre-existing right of the news media to appear at and report on judicial proceedings in accordance with law. Now, Mr. Ramseier quoted 131.1c. Audio-visual coverage of party or witness testimony in any court proceeding other than a plea and arraignment is prohibited. Well, if that 131.1c is contradictory to everything else in this section, as I just mentioned when I read Section A. But also, if you look, they allow video recordings in hearings all the time, whereas item C says it's prohibited. Witness testimony or party. Well, what about Johnny Depp case? Obviously, there were witnesses. Obviously, there were parties. It was recorded for the entire world to see. So why would it be a problem to record a property tax assessment hearing? I can see where they can deny a recording of cases where there might be a rape victim, or there's a child involved, or something. There's a logical explanation. In other words, there's other parties to the hearing, and they have to respect their rights as well. So you have to reasonably measure the rights of all parties and allow it accordingly. Well, in this case, there are no witnesses. The parties are my clients who want the thing recorded, and then the assessor. And the assessor works for the government and has no expectation of privacy. I mean, what is she hiding? What is the hearing officer hiding? He has no expectation of privacy. So I asked William Ramseier for an explanation as to why we cannot video record this hearing, and he refused to answer the question. And so I don't know what more to say. He's violating my constitutional rights. He has no business doing that, but that's exactly what he did. And not only did he do that, but he had 3 armed security officers in a hearing, in a small claims assessment review hearing. This wasn't a murder trial for a serial killer. It was an assessment hearing, trying to get the fair market value. And he had 3 armed cops in the hearing, when in over 150 other cases, we never even participated in a courtroom. It was always in a conference room. And yet we had armed guards in a small claims assessment review hearing. It's just astounding to me. And it's an abuse of their position. And as far as I'm concerned, Judge Murphy, the administrative judge, is he's responsible for all of this, and but also William Ramseier. He's making $146,000 a year as a law clerk. It's a full-time job, and yet he's moonlighting on these other positions and creating conflicts. And here he is. Having a armed police officer hovering over me in a assessment hearing with a gun and menacing me, and it just is over the top inappropriate. This is Mike Franklin, the Property Tax Guy.